afternoon. Good afternoon. Welcome to Steubing Elementary. Thank you very much for joining us today for our dedication. Welcome to parents, friends, students, and the community. We wish you all a lot of fun today, and that's what we're planning for you. I'd like to issue a special welcome to the Steubing family who are here with us today. Would you please stand and be recognized? As you can see, that's a very large family, and we're glad that all of you could be with us today. I'd like to thank in advance my staff for all their hard work and endless hours preparing for the dedication. This job could not have been done without their help. I am deeply in debt to them for all the work that they have done. Please take the opportunity to walk through the classrooms, walk through the halls, and I think you'll be very impressed with our students' work. Our third graders, under the direction of Jody Ramos, the music teacher, will now sing as the flag goes by, with fifth grade Boy and Girl Scouts posting the flags. At its conclusion, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and the invocation by Reverend Peter Manfred.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I thank you for allowing me to be a part of this dedication. As you may have noticed in the program, Mr. Steubing had roots both in the education community very deeply, but also in his own faith community, Zion Lutheran Church. One of our members decided that 60 of our current members are direct descendants of Henry Steubing. So for those of you who weren't in church earlier, this probably counts. I also want to take this moment to say it's a wonderful reminder that a lot of the pioneers in this area knew that the best way to praise God was to serve their neighbor and to build strong communities, and we're thankful for that. With that in mind, let us pray. Dear God, we thank you for this great and glorious day. We thank you for this place of learning, Henry Steubing Elementary School. May it be a place of joy and discovery and a place for children to develop both roots and wings. We thank you for those persons who have given to our community to ensure that our children have the tools they need to in turn be able to give back to their communities. And above all, give to all who teach and nurture here your love for all who learn. Amen.
I'd like to add my welcome to all of you here today. We're here for two primary reasons. One is to dedicate this school to Henry Steubing and to the Steubing family. And the other is to celebrate the opening of a brand new school. When we have a new school, there are many people that make contributions to that, and I'd like to mention a number of these folks today. The very first group I want to thank is the Northside community, all of you folks here and the people watching on television. If you had not supported the bond program in 1995, we would not have this school for our children. And so I want to thank you very much for the support that you've given to that kind of program for kids in the past. Secondly, I'd like to thank the staff here at Steubing, the teachers, the principal and the secretaries, food service workers, the custodians, for getting this school ready on time. We had 3 schools that opened this year, and during a time that those schools were under construction, we had a tremendous amount of rain, and it really made it touch and go as to whether we were going to get the schools open. But they all did open. And the week before the schools opened, all of those staff members were up here on the weekends and working long hours to get the schools ready. So I appreciate what all of those folks did to get the school ready. There are a number of people who work for the district that plan the schools, and I'm not going to introduce all of them, but I do want to introduce 2. Jerry Daniel is the Assistant Superintendent for Auxiliary Services, and Jerry was in charge of the 1995 bond issue and trying to communicate the needs to the public. And since that time, he's been in charge of working with contractors and builders and making sure that the schools get built and get built properly. So, Jerry, thank you for your contribution. One of Jerry's right-hand men is Jim Martin. Jim is the Executive Director for Facilities Planning and Maintenance, and he really works even more closely with the contractors and with the architects, and Jim himself is a registered engineer, and he makes sure that the schools get built well and get built right. So, Jim, thank you for all your hard work, too. One of the groups that provide leadership and guidance to the school district are the school trustees. We have a number of them here today, and I would like to pass on the regrets of Ray Lopez, who is our board president, and Ray was going to be here and bring remarks from the board, but he came down with a really bad sore throat and can barely talk, and so he's unable to be here, but we have several board members here today, and one of those will bring greetings to you. With us is Katie Reed, who's the vice president of the board. David Poole is a trustee. And the remaining member I'm going to introduce in just a moment. I'd also like to introduce Jack Jordan, former superintendent here in Northside. Jack was with the district for a long time and, like the Steubing family, helped lay the foundation in this community, and we're glad he's here. Before I introduce our next speaker, I do want to give one commercial, and that is we do have continuing growth, and we will be needing another bond issue in about a year from now. And we're in the early stages of planning for that, and we want to try to have a lot of community input. Y'all will be seeing that in the newspapers, and we'd encourage you to share your views on that, what the needs are. And I just say that if we can get the Steubing family registered and voting for that, we'll pass it for sure. It's now my pleasure to introduce the Secretary of the Board of Trustees, Terry Smith-Blocky, to bring greetings from the board.
Good afternoon. On behalf of the Board of Trustees, I extend you a warmest congratulations and appreciation for what we're about to embark on this afternoon. And that is a journey that unites the Northside family with a rather large branch of the Steubing family, as I see in front of us today. There was one member who was seated with the Steubing family who shows how quickly we bond together. And that individual I'd like to introduce at this time, she did not stand up when they said, if you're a Steubing family member. Her name is Peggy Perry. And for those of you on television, this moment is for you. Stand up, Miss Perry, if you will. This is Principal Pat Cerruti's twin sister. As I had the opportunity to speak briefly with members of the Scarborough family and Mr. Anderson and members of the Steubing family, I began to see the numbers of connections that occur in this community. Geraldine Scarborough was a member of the first graduating class, John Marshall High School. There were 11 students who graduated from there. I will not share the year. Ms. Scarborough asked me kindly. For those of us who get stopped at various traffic lights on Bandera Road, all the way from Eckert Road, all the way down to the Kentucky Fried Chicken was originally the Steubing Dairy Farm. And yes, there were no stoplights at one time. Someone did share that with me as well. I was particularly honored to be able to make the remarks today because it was explained to me that Henry Steubing Jr. served on the first school board. And having had the pleasure and the experience of serving on a board, I am honored to share what I've learned to some degree. Whenever an important decision has to be made, we try and look at it with a 100-year view. 100 years from now, will the decision that is made forward the education of our children? And clearly, 100 years ago today, Mr. Steubing was involved in something that has resulted 100 years later and the continuing of that tradition. And so we of the Northside School District and School Board are honored to join with you as we continue the tradition. And each person who is present today, you as well, will help us put the meaning into the next 100 years. Thank you so much.
Our students began learning about Henry Steubing long before the school was ready. In May, as I visited Helotes and Scobie and Broccoli, I brought to them the history of Henry Steubing and with the direction that they go home this summer, think about Henry Steubing, and think about what our colors and mascot should be. In August, as we prepared to choose our colors and mascot, again, the students had an opportunity to learn about Henry Steubing. A few weeks ago, Karen Peterson, the great-granddaughter of Henry Steubing, came to our campus and spoke to all our students. What a way to bring a man alive. Please be sure to visit, and you will see how they have transferred their learning into drawings and pictures. We would now like to present a video. The video is of the students and the Steubing family. At the conclusion of the video, Garnett Steubing will speak on behalf of the family.
Welcome to Henry Steubing Jr. Elementary School, home of the Steubing Stallions. In the next few minutes, we're going to learn a little more about Steubing the school and Steubing the man, for whom the school is named. Henry Steubing Jr. Elementary School opened in August of 1997, the result of voters approving the 1995 Northside School District bond issue.
We want to thank the Northside School Board for helping us to get a new school. It is great.
We love our school. Henry Steubing is the best.
The school cost more than $6 million to build and came with some great features, including a large courtyard and the latest in computer technology. It's no wonder students are thrilled with their new school, and they're ready to thank the designers and builders.
The architects of a building design it. They draw plans for the school. They give the big windows. The library and courtyard are cool. Thank you, David Bradley and staff, for designing our school. We have learned that a contractor oversees everything that is actually done to put together a building.
Thank you, Encore, for overseeing our great school.
But the design is not the only thing that makes Henry Steubing Elementary a great place. The fact that the school is named after Henry Steubing Jr. is another reason the school is so special. The school board voted to name the school for Henry Steubing, who was an education pioneer born in New Braunfels, Texas in 1872. Today, Henry Steubing has 205 direct descendants, and many of them are still in the area. They're thrilled to have a school named for Henry Steubing.
We're really honored and pleased with having the school named after Grandpa. Main thing I was happy about was the fact that it was this school here on Houseman Road where really Grandpa really grew up in this area. I mean, he literally has tracks up and down this Houseman Road here back some 7,500 years ago. So that was really significant, that part of it.
Steubing Elementary's first students soon started learning more about Henry Steubing and how you just can't use a few words to describe him.
He was a man of the land, like most people back those days were. You didn't have your specialists like we have this day and time. He was kind of a jack of all trades. He was a carpenter, a musician. His home place up there was used as kind of a central meeting place for all the people to come and make their cane molasses and all these things. He was just a general, all-around gentleman.
Grandpa, of course, was very interested in education, and he worked, I guess, on the old Avers School, and then helped build the Leon Valley School. And my dad, Emmanuel, I said, he helped build the school, and then he went to school there.
In fact, Henry Steubing was interested in education from an early age. He moved with his family to this house in what is now known as Leon Valley, and he wanted to go to school right away.
But the only school was in Helotes, and that was 10 miles away. Do you think that the bus stopped in front of his house every morning and picked him up and took him to school? No.
When Henry Steubing grew up and married, he and his wife Frances had 9 children, and he was still thinking about school, this time for them.
Well, remember that Henry Steubing had to walk 10 miles to get to school when he was a boy. So when he started having children and they were old enough to go to school, he didn't want them to have to go all the way to Helotes to school. So a couple of friends of his, and they got together and they built a small schoolhouse called Evers School, and they hired their own teacher to come there and teach their children. And that was a private school. It was just for their own children. But in 1924, Henry Steubing was on a committee of people that got together to build the first public elementary school.
No one could have predicted then that the first small public school in the area would eventually lead to the North Side Independent School District and 60,000 students. It hasn't taken the students of Henry Steubing Elementary long to learn about his life.
We learned that Henry Steubing was born on May 27, 1872 in New Braunfels, Texas. His family house is located on Bandera Road. Henry married Frances Borman in 1896, and they raised 9 children. He was primarily a farmer and an excellent carpenter.
Henry enjoyed playing the violin and several different brass instruments.
Henry Steubing Jr. died in 1957, and his wife Frances died in 1945.
Thank you, Henry Steubing Jr., for giving your name to our school.
And his descendants say if Henry Steubing were here today, he would be impressed with the school named for him.
He would say, wow, what a magnificent school you have. Because remember, he had built a little one-room school one time that was kind of like Little House on the Prairie, you know, that type of school. So when he saw this big school, he would be quite amazed at how big it is and how beautiful it is.
And Henry Steubing would be impressed with a quick tour of all the school has to offer.
There are many wonderful things about our school.
One of the greatest things is technology.
We can create all kinds of projects.
We are lucky to go to school that is looking towards the future. Thank you to everyone that made Henry Steubing Elementary possible. We know our school is the best.
Thank you, Henry Steubing and the Steubing family, for your commitment to education in the North Side Independent School District.
As a representative of the family of Henry Steubing, I want to take just a few minutes of your time here this afternoon to thank those many people who have made this such a special day for all of us. However, before doing that, I need to say a few things about Pat Cerruti. The first day I met this lady was about several months ago when 4 or 5 of us family members were invited to meet with her and discuss today's dedication ceremony. We walked into her office and naturally addressed her as Ms. Cerruti, and her first words to us was, "Hey folks, my name is Pat, not Ms. Cerruti." So with that statement, I think we all sensed that here's a lady that we're really going to enjoy working with, and Pat, I assure you, we still share those feelings here today. You've just simply been just a joy to work with. It goes without saying that the job of being a principal just carries a tremendous amount of responsibilities. But you add to that those many unknowns of opening a brand new school with a brand new student body to serve, a new staff of teachers, aides, and support personnel, many of whom you've met for the first time. Well, that just makes the job that much harder. And Pat, I'd just like to congratulate you for the tremendous job that you've done here. And finally, from those of us in the Steubing family, that you, your entire staff, and in particular Jennifer Langford, the school librarian, who worked so patiently with all of us over especially these last few weeks while we were literally coming up here on a daily basis, making calls and just kind of being a pest, I think, offering our input into what was going to be happening here. And I don't think, in fact, I know there wasn't anything that we suggested to her that y'all just didn't bend over backward to see that was included in today's program. And finally, and most importantly, to all those kids out here, to all the work that they've done going up and down the halls, it just amazes you as all the time and effort that they put into this. And really, that's why we're all here today. This all belongs to those kids. So in addition to congratulating you for the fine job you do, I almost want to express our appreciation for you letting us be just a part of this ceremony today. Thank you very much. When I found out several weeks ago that it was going to be me to respond to you here on behalf of this family today, to say the least, I had mixed emotions about doing this. First, it was an honor to be asked to doing it, but actually I guess you'd have to say I was told I was going to be doing it. And secondly, having never done anything like this before, I had absolutely no idea about what I really wanted to say. But as I sat down and put some ideas together, there was one thing that just kept coming back to my mind, and that was, if Grandpa was still with us, I wonder how he would have reacted when he found out that this school was going to be named after him. Well, after talking to several cousins, we pretty much came to the conclusion that his response would have probably been something on the order of, and this would have probably been in German too, but his response would have been like, "You say they're going to name a school after me? Why on earth would anybody do something like that?" Well, for those of us that knew Henry Steubing, I can assure you that we know why they do something like this. But for the many of y'all out there today that didn't know him, I'd like to share a few things about him with you. He was a man who made his living primarily by being a farmer, but he also supplemented his income by being a member of a band, playing several brass instruments along with his trusty old fiddle at many of the social gatherings in the area. He was also a very talented carpenter, and it was he and several of his neighbors who built the old original Evers School, which was then located at the corner of Evers and Hebner Road. Some years later, he also was involved in the building of the original Leon Valley Elementary. Grandpa was a very compassionate man, but from the stories that I remember hearing from my dad and aunts and uncles, he was a very strict disciplinarian. And I guess when you have 9 kids running around the house, you got to be a disciplinarian just to keep your sanity. In the latter years of life, I can still remember when my dad and I would go to visit him. As we drove up that old dusty gravel road up towards his house, there was 2 things that you could be sure of seeing. One, he'd be sitting out there in his old rocking chair, and 2, he's going to be reading a book. With his involvement in the building of 2 schools and his passion for reading, it indicates to me that here was a man who was very cognizant in the importance of a good education. I could go on, but in the interest of time here this afternoon, those are just a few of the things that about the man, Henry Steubing, who we think was so justified in having this school named after. With that said, now I want to offer a big thank you to all those people who are primarily responsible for making this day come true for the Steubing family. First and most obviously, we want to thank the Board of Trustees and Mr. Ed Rawlinson. Mr. Rawlinson for seeing fit to pick the name of Henry Steubing and recommending it to the board and then to the board for accepting his recommendation. To each of y'all, thank you very much. Next. Next, our thanks goes to the Leon Valley Historical Society and their president, Mr. Ken Alley. Several weeks after we had sent our letter of nomination to the school district, Jerry Scarborough and I met with the Historical Society and read our letter to them and asked them if they would consider sending a letter to the school board endorsing our efforts. But only after a few minutes of discussion, they unanimously agreed to do so. And at this point in time, Mr. Alley took it upon himself to not only write this letter of endorsement, but also to make several trips, I understand, to the district office promoting the name of Henry Steubing for our new school. I guess you could say that Mr. Alley kind of served the purpose of a lobbyist on our behalf. So Mr. Alley and Historical Society, we certainly do thank you for your efforts. The last person I want to recognize today is undoubtedly that one individual who was most encouraging to us in our effort to have a school named after Grandpa. And that person is Mr. Jack Jordan, who was superintendent at the time when we submitted our letter of nomination to the school district. While we were in the initial stages of just talking about whether or not we really wanted to pursue this idea, we became aware that the school district was following a policy of naming schools after people who were in some form or fashion directly involved in the educational process in the school district. People like retired board members, past principals, teachers, etc. And it was at this point in time that I was able to convince my wife, who incidentally works at the central office and had occasion to speak with Mr. Jordan, to ask him if he thought that he and the board would consider naming a school after a person who, though maybe not directly involved in the educational process, but who would have to be considered in every sense of the word a true pioneer in the Leon Valley Helotes district. At this point, she also reminds him that although the Steubing name is still somewhat recognized in the area, there are many people with surnames other than Steubing who are direct descendants of Henry Steubing. Names of people like the Nichols, the Kriegers, the Belgians, Tietzes, Wrights, Hands, Andersons, and so on. And I'm sure that Mr. Jordan, through his many years of service in the district as a coach, teacher, principal, and finally superintendent, recognized many of these names, and his response to her was something on the order of, you know, there certainly should be a place in this school district to honor people like Henry Steubing. You tell your family to write a letter of nomination and have it sent directly to me, and I'll see that it gets attention of the board. Well, even though it was several years after your retirement, Mr. Jordan, before a bond issue was passed to build some new schools, I can't help but believe that with the tremendous amount of respect that you still have within this district, that the feelings you shared with us back then still carried a lot of weight when it came to select a name for this new school. So, Mr. Jordan, we want to thank you for the encouragement that you gave us, and also for whatever it was that you might have done to see that our letter received the attention that it needed. Thank you, Mr. Jordan. And finally, the last thing I want to do here today is share with you that a cousin of mine, Gloria Anderson, who acts as our family historian, received just last week. A number of years ago, she and her family made a trip over to Germany, and while they were there, they made it a point to visit the little town of Bicken. This is the town that our great-great-grandfather left back in 1846 when he and some others decided to come to America. While they were there, they met some long-distance relatives, and one of them was a man named Gustav Steubing, who happens to be a retired school superintendent in that area. About a month ago, Gloria sent some pictures of this school to him, and also some of the newspaper articles that were written about it. And just last week, she got a letter back from him, and I'd like to share with you some of the things that he said in that letter. I've just received your letter telling me about the tremendous honor that your school district has bestowed upon you and your family. I would like for you to know that I have presented these items to the people in Wiesbaden who are in charge of our state archives, and they have decided to put them on permanent display there. Also, this information is going to be put in our local newspapers so that all the town folks will be made aware of the honor that the Steubing family has been given. Thank you for sharing this with me, and congratulations again on receiving this tremendous honor. So I just thought I would let you all know that not only is there a bunch of Steubings here in San Antonio and Helotes and Leon Valley who are really excited about what has happened to them, that this occasion is also being celebrated in that little town of Bicken in Germany. Well, that pretty much sums up what I wanted to say here this afternoon, Pat. But before leaving, I just want to say that on behalf of our entire family, and in particular, two ladies sitting here near me, Ms. Dorothy Wright and Mrs. Ada Krieger, who are the only two remaining survivors of the 9 children that Henry and Frances Steubing raised on that little farm over on the corner of Bandera and Eckerd Roads. Thank you to everyone who had anything to do with making this day a day that I know we will never forget. Thank you all to everyone.
If you'll notice, there's a milk can, and that milk can was donated by the Steubing family, and that is our time capsule. And you need to come up and take a look at it. We welcome you all back in the year 2017 as we celebrate the opening of our time capsule. Also beside the milk can is the picture of Henry Steubing that we will place in the library in a place of honor as a constant reminder to us about the value of education. I have just a few things I'd like to give Garnett and his family as an appreciation for being here today. The first is a copy of the video.
Thank you.
Okay. And the next is a Steubing t-shirt, which I hope fits.
That's great. Thank you, Pat.
Thanks.
Good afternoon. Since this is Steubing Elementary's first year, to commemorate, the PTA will be giving the opportunity to our community to purchase a personalized inscribed brick. These bricks will pave an area in our courtyard. The members of the Steubing Elementary PTA would like to present a certificate to the Steubing family. This certificate represents that a brick has been purchased in memory of Henry Steubing.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. We also want you to know that once this has been completed, you will all be invited back to see the Henry Steubing Walk of Fame.
We will now have our third graders sing "We Are the Children" and the Steubing School Song.
I would like to thank all of you for coming out and helping us to celebrate this wonderful occasion today. The school is now open for self-guided tours, and I hope everyone can go and see what hard work our students have done. There's also refreshments in the gym. Thank you.